So we are on.
Hi, Archie, Graham.
Hi, Alan. How you doing?
Hello, my lovely people. Amazing to see you. Another action-packed week. There's a few things I want to talk about this week, but let's start with Keir Starmer's statement. Have you read the whole thing? Right? Some people in the comments have. No, there's no note.
I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I've seen the tweets.
You have an actual life outside of this. Yeah, Keir Starmer has said that he thinks that single-sex spaces must be preserved for women only in certain circumstances. So don't get too excited, ladies. You're still going to have to share most of your spaces with that.
I mean, to be fair, we want to share most public spaces with men,
yes.
and this was in the Labour Manifesto, wasn't it? The fact that they would uphold the Equality Act, but what we really need, and excuse me for not having read it yet, and you may have said it, but what we want is an absolute clarification, and not just for us, for everyone, so that we don't get organisations like Stonewall trying to go in and tell people that it's actually against the law, because you know how laws work. One is the actual law and the other is the interpretation of it, the societal interpretation of the law. And if the whole of society interprets a law in a different way than the actual law, it really makes very little difference what the law says. So what we want is a full-on clarification.
Yes, which we probably won't get. I mean, it took two or 3 years of Rosie Duffield being monstered before he even said this. So someone said in the comments that it was after he met Duffield. So is that true? Did he meet Rosie? Does anyone know? Maybe they will.
Oh, they did actually finally speak.
I'm not sure. I think so. I think I heard something along those lines. Well, we'll see. Oh, Marianne Miller's in. Hi, Marianne.
Yeah, hi, Marianne.
How are you doing? I hope you're well.
Yes.
Now, the other thing I want to have we should perhaps linger on there for a second. So what do you think the reaction will be? I mean, basically, he said in certain circumstances. So presumably, if you were a sane human being, you would mean things like rape crisis centers, changing rooms. Presumably, he would answer no to the Stanland question. But, does any of this matter if, as you say, he's not going to lay it on the line?
Well, none of it matters because there's no definition of trans woman. That's the problem, of course, is that there's literally no definition of trans woman except man who says he's a trans woman,
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I saw someone, the brilliant thing about the conversations I'm seeing online now is that the usual tricks are not working by trans rights activists. I see them all, because people will say, you're saying trans people can't get into this or that, and they'll be kind of corrected and say, no, gender reassignment is protected. You can't what's the word? What's the bloody word that begins with D? You can't
discriminate.
Discriminate.
You can't discriminate against trans people, and then they go, I mean, the most amazing thing, the funniest thing is they claim that all these fucking AGP guys out there are just on their way to transitioning. They're just delayed, and they'll be cutting off their penises as soon as they get a chance.
Yeah, that's what my ex-friend said when I was like, well, why is it that almost all of them still have their intact penises? And he was like, well, some people, they just can't afford the surgery, and some people they haven't saved up enough yet for it, and it's like, oh, honey,
Exactly.
Yeah.
As Magdalene said, of course you're terrified they chop your cock off. What was that? That was what was his name?
The male lesbian, wasn't it? The bearded lesbian.
I'm sorry, yeah, the bearded lesbian who said, the thought of surgery terrifies me. Yeah,
what is his name?
Like, here's the choice. You can lose all sexual function or keep enjoying your fetish of dressing as a schoolgirl in a porno movie, I'd say most are going to choose the latter. So yeah, the definition of trans would be good. A definition of transphobia would be good as well. You know, so we don't. So people don't keep getting their lives ruined for tripping across it, tripping on one of the tripwires that they constantly are laying for them, for themselves and for us. You know.
Yeah.
You know, it will be interesting now that he said this, because I would imagine that, you know, the other side, they will be going, oh, you know, we can't have this. So hopefully there will be quite a lot of fuss made. So he will actually have to address it like properly. I mean, I really hope that will happen, because, you know, right now it's just a vague sentence, isn't it? That doesn't have full on meaning.
Yeah.
It's a start. But, you know, clarification is needed for everyone, both sides. And then we can, you know, carry on fighting over it.
Yeah. Well, what he really needs to do is establish that he's willing to confront trans activists on their excesses in any way. Just say anything to the trans activist side and say, no, we're not going to allow this. Something firm and real. Because it sounds like every time they speak, it's just nonstop pandering. Like there's this terror of upsetting the trans lobby. And it's like, you know, the trans lobby in the UK seems like the NRA in the United States, where politicians are just terrified of crossing it, or they were, for far too long. And then the NRA actually didn't have any power anymore, but that sort of sense that they're all powerful lingered for 20 years, you know, when they were actually going bankrupt and lost all their membership. Yeah. And it seems like the trans movement, people are turning on it. You know, people are getting really sick and tired of it. The politicians are just not seeing that yet, that they're not some all-powerful monolith. And they have to start speaking up, challenging these people. Yeah.
The problem, I think, is that they have what looks like a wide base of support, because they've got lunatics in every area of life.
And 14-year-olds on Twitter making a fuss.
Exactly. Know? But you know, it's the 14-year-olds and the kind of enforcers like you know, Billingham and Comerford and all them, they kind of form the kind of crappy biscuit base for the whole movement. But on top of this are people like, you know, let's say, who could we say, Nicola Coughlan, Aisling B, you know, all these kind of people who provide an air of respectability around it by doing things like signing petitions against J.K. Rowling and stuff like that. They make it seem that it's got like wider societal support than it has, and of course it doesn't. No one believes in this shit. You know, only a few lunatics believe in it. But it's so strange the way it's been amplified. I think the other thing is America is so crazily captured. You know.
Oh, the tone is very different in North America and Canada too. You know, it's still, you know, even people who are gender critical, there's still a tone sometimes that's like, you know,
What do you mean?
I don't know. I think maybe it's just because I've spent so much time in the gay community that there's still, you know, there's still this sense that, like, you know, courtesy to trans people is really, really important still, and they're really vulnerable and that kind of thing. And stuff like that is true for every human, of course, including people who identify as trans. But like, there's still a sense of like there's more required for people who are trans.
Which is why it's really important for the UK to push back and to sort of be the first, or to continue. I mean, we have been pushing back. We need to be the first ones to show other countries that, you know, we can have a society where you can respect trans people's identities, but also women's spaces.
Yeah.
You know, it's not actually that hard. The only hard thing about it is that trans activists don't want this. Yeah. They don't want this. They want full inclusion. Not all trans people. But trans activism is after full-on inclusion. I mean, this is very clear, and this is why women are having to push back. You know, honestly, how many times have we said it's such a small area? We want something really small. It's not a huge deal at all. Some single-sex spaces for women when they're in a position of vulnerability with respect to male bodies. For Christ's sake, it's not a big ask. But you know, the point of it is that, for women, this is about safety and dignity. And for trans people, it is a bit about safety, but it's mainly about validation, I think.
Yeah,
which is why
it's 100% about validation.
The third spaces option isn't acceptable.
That's why the Starmer thing might create a bigger fuss than we think, because like I remember Rachel McKinnon or Veronica Ivy or whoever, whatever the name is of the person who's married to that paedophile or cohabiting with that paedophile. They said something like, and by the way, I'm not making that up. Rachel McKinnon is the second person who's cohabiting with a paedophile. But they said something like, if you say trans women aren't women for sport, you have to say it for everything. And that's why the battle lines on the very few areas where women's safety is important, where women's rights are important, that's why they're so hotly contested, because they know, like, basically, I was thinking when Starmer said this, you know, in some cases, women need same-sex segregation. You have to ask Starmer, continue that thought. Why would that be? Would that be because trans women are not literally women? Would that be the reason? Because that is actually the truth of the matter. And if you're too scared to tell the truth, then how can you ever be prime minister? Imagine a prime minister who can't tell the truth. You know, who thinks it's
and actually
rude.
This is. Well, yes, and that is a massive problem, isn't it? That was like, anyway, we'll get back to it, Davy. But I'm just reading the HuffPost now, and it said, asked to qualify Labour's position after the briefing, a source pointed out that the Equality Act rightly assumes the inclusion of trans women except in specific circumstances. Now, the problem is here is that this Equality Act, it's only really about specific spaces. I mean, it is only about a very small amount of spaces. So I'm not quite sure
but also
what those spaces are that should be single sex and yet include trans women, but as opposed to the single sex that exclude them. Because we're only asking for, it's only like prisons, hospitals, etc. Toilets, changing rooms, anyway.
Boxing rings.
Boxing rings.
Listen, you reminded me of something there. What was it? But also, you put, well, yeah, Davey. I just found out that the puberty blocker firm Pharmaceuticals that paid the Lib Dems to make Andrew, for Davey to make a clown of himself on Andrew Marr. That's like 1.3 million they've spent. 1.3 million they've given the party. That's why the Lib. That is
a lot, isn't it? That is quite.
It is a lot. Imagine if they threatened to take that money away, what the Lib Dems would do. That would be a lot of money for the Lib Dems to lose, But
it would, and honestly, although he came across like an astonishingly poorly on Marr, like we said, I'm not sure that the people really care anymore. I mean, it does seem, like we said, there are no. There don't seem to be any consequences for like lying or coming across as a complete idiot.
Those two
compared
lunatics,
to all that money.
Those two lunatics in the Greens look like they're going to win. Womack and what's her name? They called women turds who wanted same-sex spaces. It's just. I hope to fuck that the people entering the Greens put their votes in, But the thing I was going to bring up on your point, Helen, is what you were saying about that, the spokesman who said that about trans people. Again, what do you mean when you say trans people? What are trans people? No one can tell you. Like, this is something that I've been arguing from the very first moment I got into this, that there is no fixed definition of trans people. So when people accuse me of slagging off trans people or whatever, often they're talking about fucking, guys who have made no attempt whatsoever. Beards, fucking, wearing lumberjack shirts. You know what I mean? Like,
and the truth is that they won't. If you tell a trans activist or somebody who's defending the trans movement that there are just cross-dressing fetishists who identify as trans, and they'll just say that's not what trans is. That's not what trans is at all. That's a bigoted thing to say. And then I turn around and say to them, well, I can show you a cross-dressing fetishist who is telling us that they identify as trans, and I can show you that there isn't a single person, including you, that is going to deny their claim.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't think cross-dressing fetishists count as trans, then go up to Eddie Izzard and say, no, your pronouns are he, him. As long as you don't do that. If you're not stopping them coming in, they're coming in,
Yes.
Yeah, because
Exactly.
this brings me on to something else that, you know, I've been saying for a while, but I've now decided to tackle it sort of head on when I say it. And it's probably one of the strongest arguments in the sort of TRA arsenal, which is to claim that trans women have been using women's spaces
Oh yeah,
for
that
decades
bullshit.
with no problem. And this relies very, very heavily on there being no definition of trans,
Yes.
no definition of spaces, and no definition of no problem. Because it's easy to say, and actually then to sort of an outside observer, they might say, oh yes, so it's actually the women who are the aggressors, because this is, you know, so you're the aggressors, you're
Yes.
trying to take something away.
Yes.
And so, you know, so now I tackle this head on by sort of suggesting, you know, what I did just say, but also to say it is an absolute lie to suggest that male-born people with a penis have been undressing in communal changing rooms with women and girls for decades without any issues. This is simply not true. The ask has changed. It's something that was okay maybe before most, you know, women would accept it because it was a small handful of transsexuals.
And they were usually good enough to be almost stealth. They honestly, seemed,
maybe women probably did mind, but such a small number meant that, you know, there was, and there's also no huge sort of momentum. Maybe there were individual women that did stop using changing rooms, whatever, but because it wasn't sort of a huge deal, nobody really knew. It's not publicized. However, the ask has changed, and it's an absolute, completely intellectually dishonest thing to do, to pretend that this isn't the case. So now, you know, the answer to it all of the time is, but the ask has changed. And when the ask changes, then the response changes. And so this is why the response has changed. This is why we're saying no, because the ask is completely different. It is completely different. And it's a lie to suggest that it isn't true.
It's interesting that it seems to me that particular thought terminating cliche, which you see repeated everywhere, it may be one of the few times when I think I might know the source. I think it's that death metal guitarist, Colin Montgomery, Kate Montgomery, who basically keeps repeating it.
Yes,
no matter,
always.
And you see other people repeating it, and you just know they got it off that bloke, you know.
And I've actually, before Montgomery blocked me, I'd actually made this point. I'd responded to this consistently like this. And I would say, are you suggesting that male-born people with penis have been using? And the answer, there would be no answer to that. It literally just would be ignored. And then you see it again, sort of being said to someone else. It's another soundbite that you know, people use that, you know, it doesn't really matter when, like, if not everyone pushes back all of the time, they will just carry on doing it. So this is, I think, a new point to make, and I'm just going to make it consistently to people now. Yeah,
absolutely. We've got some great guests today, by the way. Later on, they should be turning up. Oh gosh, no, 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Sorry, 12 minutes. We're speaking to two of the women who were present at the Pride March in France that got attacked with someone who tried to set either the people carrying it or the banner on fire using a flare or something. It was really shocking stuff. So we'll be having a chat with them in a few minutes. Is there anything else we should talk about before we go into that? Oh, I know. How about the bloke who I just heard being interviewed as a bloke? I just thought, oh, that's a bloke giving this opinion, and the opinion was that a small spike, or let's just say a spike. He didn't say small. A spike in women being murdered was an acceptable price to pay for the equality of men going into women's spaces. I couldn't believe it. In fact, I posted it and I only kind of half paid attention, but then I realized who said it. And it's that hilarious guy who dresses like he's in Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, he dresses like a little doll. Yeah.
He dresses like a doll you'd find in a creepy old house. And
a haunted doll.
Yeah. And this is the guy who said it. When I heard it, I just thought, this bloke has balls of steel to be thinking he could say this. But of course, he thinks he can say that because he's a woman. Because he thinks he's a woman. It's the most extraordinary thing. It's probably the worst thing I've heard in this whole.
He thinks he can say it because people don't challenge it.
Yeah.
Where are the people where are the media not challenging this sort of narrative? This is why he thinks he can say it, because essentially he can.
I always wonder, did this begin with Trump, with people going, when Trump said, "Oh, I have like 5 million gold bars in my ear," and everyone went, "Oh, really? Does he? Does he? Maybe he does." He claimed today that he had 5 million gold bars in his ear. He claimed it. Let's look into this claim. And also, I remember them saying at the time that they could never say he was lying because they felt that was a decision as to his motivations. So they couldn't say he was lying. But I still find it. So are we as a species now completely, powerless when it comes to outrageous liars? Is that?
Well, I don't think it started with Trump. I think it accelerated with Trump, but it started with social media, I think, and smartphones and Facebook and Twitter. People are just exhausted and they're inundated with information. There's no hierarchy of information anymore. There's no sort of gatekeeping of information. Like the newspapers, they had editors, and sure there were problems. There were newspaper barons who had their biases and things like that. Your Hearst and the Fox News guy and all that, but at least there was like truth. There was some reliability to it, even though it wasn't a perfect system. Now it's just like free flowing. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody tells you whatever they believe. And it's just exhausting to filter through it all. And people are just giving up, Right. And they just don't want to deal with issues because they're too complicated. They don't want to deal with the trans issue because it's just too complicated. They've got already all their attention span is spread so thin with everything going on. They just don't have the time,
That's forgivable when it comes to just, you and me or ordinary people out in the street, But when it comes to like Kath Viner, who's the editor of The Guardian, what is going on there? I mean, they have run 2 pieces saying that the wee spa was a hoax. And then after it was revealed as not being a hoax, they pulled that Judith Butler stunt, I mean, what is going on? How do they think they can get away with it? And
I know. They're supposed to be having like a letter from the ombudsman apologizing to the readers, saying they're going to fire some editors. That's what's supposed to happen, you know?
Exactly.
Instead, it's just literally not even an apology, not even a correction, maybe. I don't even know if they put corrections on their stories. They must have, but... Kath
Viner did a similar thing to what Alex Jones did with the Newtown massacre. Like Alex Jones immediately started spreading false flag nonsense around the Newtown massacre. These were kindergartners who were killed. And everyone was so confused, and it was so confusing and so kind of hard to parse what was going on. A whole classroom full of kindergartners were shot, and America still didn't do anything about their guns. Right?
And the parents of those kindergartners were attacked.
You're going to have something.
The victims were vilified. And these women are being vilified. This is what happened. There were riots outside of Wee Spa. There were crazy Antifa people,
Yeah,
so it is exactly
Rosie
the
Duffield
same.
Is getting threats, cannot go to the Labour Party conference. Julie Bindel was attacked. This debate does not attract, and I would count myself amongst this number, the most well-balanced people. It is a debate that unfortunately, like the whole trans thing is like a lighthouse for lots of people who are in distress, certainly, but also lots of crazy, unbalanced people, who are desperate to believe in conspiracies, in the idea that people hate them, in ideas like transgenocide. And The Guardian is actually promoting this kind of a view of the world.
And also,
it's really reckless.
It is reckless, and I want to go back again to Laurie Penny, who has now blocked me. But I did find I saw a tweet saying the issue with the Wee Spa incident was not that the woman in question is trans; It's that, as far as we know, she was a predator and behaving in a predatory manner, with absolutely zero thought of the correlation between people with a penis in women's spaces and people with a penis behaving in a predatory manner. For fuck's sake, that's why he was there. And it's just this absurd use of she and woman. It's just jarring. And why? What? It's because presumably you've gone down this path, and you just feel as if you have to back up. You have to back it up. You can't just backtrack. You can't. People just double down and triple down here. Because it matters more to be on the right side of history than it does maybe right now for honesty and reflection. You've got a tribe and you're in it.
Penny's other thing is to every so often, and Claire Jones caught her brilliantly on this, where she goes, gender critical people, I wonder why they do this or that, and she always asks these kind of rhetorical questions and then completely ignores all the answers. Do you know what I mean? She doesn't, and she only engages with people in a kind of hurt, angry sense before she either blocks them, or I think Jane eventually blocked Penny because Penny was so stupid. But it's just extraordinary how disingenuous Penny is about trying to understand the issue. I think Penny doesn't understand the issue, pretends they want to understand the issue. And it's just, the most important thing.
She understands the issue. She understands the issue. Owen Jones understands the issue. They have got a massive vested interest in pretending that they don't understand the issue, because they must understand the issue, because the issue is obvious. The issue is absolutely obvious.
Well, they're not mentally ill. They should understand things like sex segregation.
Of course they understand. Of course they understand. They just have a vested interest in pretending not to understand. It's simply that's how it is, and that's why it's extremely frustrating, because they do understand, but they are never going to say, "Oh, I get it now," because they do get it. They just have, they don't agree with it. That's fine, but instead of not disagreeing with it properly by saying, "Well, actually, I do hear you, but
here are my counter arguments."
Yes, it's. Trans women are women, therefore there is no problem. It's a way of not actually addressing the problem. It's a pretense.
I think they're running out of road. The Starmer thing today, even though it's a bit weak, it might bring it to more attention, and people might start speaking about it properly. Oh
yeah. Well, Owen Jones is going to have to write some breathtaking piece with some words in the headline that are like, "This astonishing betrayal from Keir Starmer by vulnerable trans women must be stopped." You're going to see something like that in the Guardian this week.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I guess so. That'll be interesting. And the Guardian can't back down as well. They're like a newspaper version of Owen Jones and Nori Penny. They have to keep going. They have to really go.
I was going to say that Owen Jones's pieces on trans are so hyperbolic and extreme. They're like, that stuff, they call it chum. Like when you finish an article on Huffington Post or something, and then there's all these boxes of ads that look like recommended related articles, but they're always this diet tip is being kept secret from you. You've got to click now. That kind of thing. That's this wildly exaggerated language and this totally hyperbolic clickbait. It's called chum because it's to lure you to click it. Yes. And Owen Jones is just a human chum bucket. He's just turning the Guardian into chum.
It's very true. It is. It's feeding. It's always feeding time at the Guardian. Listen, we have our guests here. So we can bring them in. Now they are in somewhat disguise, and you'll see why when we start speaking to them. Hello, S, and hello, Morgane. Nice to have you on.
Bonjour.
Hello. Bonjour. Hi. Nice. Yes. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting us.
Not at all. Now, I've posted a little bit about what happened in France, and we've had it in our weekly roundup. But could you do a recap just to explain what happened the other week at the Pride March? Yes. Morgane, sorry, S, were you about to start?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, yes, S.
We are Résistance Lesbienne. We are a lesbian radical feminist group. and we are into doing direct actions for lesbian visibility. We did one at Pride Paris in June, where we got violence from a trans activist. And then it was our second action in Bordeaux. And
Yes.
maybe, Morgan, if you want to explain a little bit what happened during the action.
Yes, so we were marching in the top of the march, so with our banners saying about how we are lesbians, how we want the transition process to stop because it's hurting a lot of women and girls, and we were having very positive messages saying, and some people went around us and just listening to us and everything. Everything was fine. Some people were shouting from always outside the march, but we were used to that, so we just kept on walking. And at one point, we heard that there was a group of people coming from behind, so coming up from the march because they've been warned by a friend or someone that radical feminists were at the front. And so we got prepared maybe to meet a group of people who we would discuss, but one of them come with a flare. So they had this huge banner saying anti-Terf, anti-fascist group. And so they were having like this guy just took this flare, light it up and said, "We're going to burn you." And so he came very, very close to us and the banners. And so we got pretty scared, especially because there was not a lot of people around doing something to stop him.
Yeah.
So we went in the front of the march. So we were kind of afraid for our security at that point because they were trying to burn the banners, but also because some other people from the group came in front of us to block us.
The sound is getting a little bit weird. I'm not sure what's happening, but I'm hearing my voice coming out on one of the. Maybe S, if you could mute your microphone. Yeah, that's it. That's sorted. Sorry, Morgan. Go ahead.
So some people were trying to block us from moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of felt like some kind of trap was going on.
Yeah.
And so because we're in the front of the march, we had like the police versus the security of the march watching. So we managed to escape. A lot of people around on the sidewalks were applauding as we left. Even though we're just being threatened by a man with a flare, lighting flare.
And you're lesbians at a gay pride parade.
What?
You're lesbians
at a gay pride
parade, and people are cheering your removal. That's astonishing.
Yeah, because we are not lesbians, we are Terf.
Right.
So this is something completely different because they managed to say that now we are not women, we are not lesbians, we are the worst fascist people on the earth, and so. Yeah. And I understood that we are not women in their eyes anymore. They dehumanize us because so many people were chanting "burn them."
Wow!
And burn a woman is like a very strong symbol, and no one seemed to be shocked by that. And I was really amazed to see how there was no connection being made between these men trying to burn us and what happened to so many women in Europe in the 17th century. Had been burned as well. So yeah, it was really scary.
Astonishing.
You were going to say something there.
The people who applauded, they directly came from the group. It was not just random people. It was anti-queer people.
Right.
Yes. And it sounds like it was mostly men then who were cheering your removal and who were shouting to burn you. Is that right?
Yes, but there was a few women who, especially one, while we were escaping, she followed us. And at some point we were scared that she would completely, like she would follow us once we left the parade, and then there wouldn't be any police to...
to get you away from the protection of the police.
Just tried to block her, and then she was really violent in her words she was using. She said, "You shake and you fuck off." Like she was shouting. So basically, we should be shaking with what's happening.
Wow. I just want to point out something. You said the signs they were saying said anti-Terf, anti-fascist. There's something telling that it's anti. It's so much easier to whip up hatred and opposition to a group of people. And the word fascist, I mean, genuine fascism, we're all against that, but you can use the word fascist, you can apply it to anyone. But it's just so telling that these people are whipping up hate. And here you have people saying, burn witches, anti, this group of people, they're dehumanized, they deserve to be burned. I hope you shake. This is just whipping up feverish hate. But I wonder, what is your sense of being TERFs, so to speak, being radical feminists, gender critical lesbians in France and in the gay culture in France? Like, when this parade was organized, did the organizers know that your group was going to be marching at the front of it?
No, they didn't know.
Right. Okay. So it was an action. Yes. And so, but I'm interested in Artie's question in a wider sense as well. I mean, I'm quite surprised that, well, I'm always surprised that this ideology takes off in any country because it's so mad. But I thought that France would be another country that would be somewhat immune to it. For instance, even in the language, with your feminine and masculine verbs or nouns and so on, it just seems that this stuff wouldn't really be able to take a hold. Has it gotten, when did it start taking a hold in France, and how long have you been fighting it?
Well, I think it came through universities in the early 2010s.
Right.
Then
so same as here, really.
And then it got bigger and bigger through leftist circles, and then feminist circles, and then I think it started really accelerating and becoming a little bit more mainstream 3-4 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you think that there, like over here, we know that most people don't really know it's happening, and in fact, when there was a similar action at Pride in the UK, you know, even someone like Stephen Fry condemned it and was arguing that, you know, these were anti-trans people who were removed from the march, and he didn't really understand it at all. Is that the same with the mainstream, you know, attention in France? Do people understand it? Do people know what's going on? Morgane?
Actually, no. Mainly because I think the difference between the UK and France, it's about same-sex spaces. In France, we do not have as much women's spaces as you have in the UK, because it has been seen, especially since around 68, with like demonstration of students. Male students wanted to have access actually to women's dormitory in university. I mean, single sex spaces are seen by many people in France as sexism.
That's strange.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And so I think that because we don't have a lot of places to defend, it's harder for people to understand what is being taken from us.
Yes.
And I think that this is why it's kind of difficult to fight, because I mean, there is not media attention about what's happening, about, like, even though law is modifying in a big, like transphobia is now in the law and everything, and that you can maybe say that if your employer or coworker is not using you favoring pronouns, it's transphobia. Even though not a lot of people know about it, and most of them just, take that as a package of tolerance and to be polite and not wondering what's happening. Yeah. And I see that, and really not being aware also about, like, the medical side of it, the impact of young girls, about lesbians. And I think that, like it's kind of a very, very pernicious way, because nobody is really understanding what's going on. And we just felt like we don't know how much it's going to take for people to realize how important it is. And I think because we are in patriarchy, and that women fought so hard, sometimes for so little, the fact that right now most of women radical feminists women who are targeting for speaking up are women and lesbians, already in the margins in the society, saying like,
Yes.
we don't have a lot of media attention, we don't have a lot of people do not believe as much what we say they do to men. For now, it's like, it's just about this small group of people. I think that, I think like it's like women have been the first to speak up for so many causes every time. And I think that it's just people just don't realize what's happening because it's disguised behind tolerance and behind being aware that human beings are so involved now that sex doesn't matter and everything. So I don't know what it's going to take for all the people to really wake up, but I think it's going to be pretty bad.
Yeah, my worry sometimes is that one of the things that we keep predicting is going to happen, you know, a murder or an assault or a rape or something, you know, something like already women's prisons in the UK are essentially mixed, you know, in Scotland as well, and Ireland. Sorry, I'll just point out one thing. But the interesting thing is that self-ID is not the law in Scotland and England, and yet there are still men in women's prisons, whereas it is the law in Ireland. And again, there are men in women's prisons. Sorry, Helen, go ahead.
No, I think it's quite interesting that point about women's spaces being seen as sexist in France, because actually I'm seeing a lot more of this argument being used here in order, for, you know, to when I ask about male people in women's spaces, I've seen a few just recently say, but it's sexist, and it's now sort of arguing for all men to be let in. And you can see that this is the logical endpoint of the argument, isn't it? If they can't win on a subset of men being allowed in, then let's just go for all of them under the guise that, you know, segregation is wrong.
Yeah. And the assault that happened at the Pride March, what effect did it have? Did it reach any kind of wider attention of the public, or was it just seen as a small, you know, niche thing that happened?
In France itself, we received support from the lesbian community.
Oh, great! That's something great.
Lesbian feminist community, but anyway, there's no other lesbian community than this.
Yeah.
So, but and we received a lot of support online from all the French gender critical and radical feminist networks online, you know, Instagram and so on. Like, we are the first, basically we are the only group to speak about trans issue right now in France. So we represent, like, there's a lot of people who feel represented by what we say. Mm-hmm. But from the feminist associations, we received nothing.
Yeah.
We received nothing after Pride Paris, and we received nothing after this one in Bordeaux. Even coming from the feminist associations who are abolitionists of prostitution and who are internally gender critical, they don't take a public stance on this, probably because they're scared of the backlash, but also I think it would be different if we were heterosexual women talking about it in a more conventional way. Yes. Because we are lesbians, there's Claire Starmer. She wrote something on Twitter after what happened in the Bordeaux Pride, and she wrote a tweet saying that usually lesbian lives are seen as expendables by everyone else than lesbians. This is what's happening right now with the lack of support from French feminist groups.
Yes, yeah. It's the same over here. There's two kinds of feminism over here. The feminism that is fighting this and the feminism that is pretending nothing is wrong, you know. There was some good news from France, actually. I'm sure you know about this, but just trying to find it again. Sorry. Apparently, about 50 psychiatrists, doctors, and intellectuals have denounced the, quote, ideological hold on the bodies of children made in the name of the emancipation of, quote, the transgender child. That seems like a pretty big moment. Do you think it is? Morgan?
Actually, I haven't read this article. I haven't heard about it. So,
Right.
Did you?
S, have you read about it?
I heard about it only, and but I also know that last week there's one of the first book on the trans issue in France that was published by a woman philosopher called Claude Habib, and she's actually taking a critical stance, the first
Right.
critical stance on this. So, yeah, I think there are some steps that are being made.
Just little glints of light.
Sorry.
Like little glints of light, hopefully. Like another thing I was going to ask is in terms of the problem of children being transitioned, is that as big an issue in France as it is over here? Has rapid onset gender dysphoria kind of taken over as many young girls as it has here? S, I think you were going to answer.
Well, we don't have official data like you have in the UK, or at least it wasn't published. But I think the few of us who kind of are in contact directly or indirectly with young girls, we can see a difference. We can see more and more of them calling themselves non-binary or trans. So I definitely think that if we could get the data, we would see a surge. But
yeah, that's one of the things about this fight. It's so hard to find actual information because every time anyone tries to study it, they get mobbed by trans rights activists. This is the first phenomenon I've ever seen where the trans rights activists are looking to understand it less rather than understand it more. It's a very strange situation. Can anyone? What are you guys doing in terms of your profile? Is there anything we can help with in terms of amplifying or getting people to visit a site? Do you have a site set up? What's next for your group?
Well, so far, like now we are going just to recover from the action.
Yes.
We did have expenses for both actions we did, so we would be happy if you can share our website and maybe our PayPal. We are a very young group of lesbians. We are all in our 20s. Some are not even 20. So we are not like millionaires or established middle class,
Yeah.
Cool. And then we will keep on with the gender debate, of course, in France, but we'll see.
Okay, well, if there's anything we can do over here in terms of helping you out with anything you need to get out there, do let us know, and please come back on, whenever you want, and tell us about the situation in France. Overall, let me just ask: are you optimistic about the situation there? I mean, do you think in the UK we have a pretty good counter movement going on now to the trans movement? Are you optimistic that France will eventually put up the same resistance?
We'll see, but we don't have a movement like you have in the UK. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Maybe Morgan, you're on mute.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, I was on mute. I mean, I want to be, because I know that thanks to our action, so many lesbians and women contacted us and said, of course, we feel the same. Of course, we know that everything what's going on right now with the trans movement is wrong. We are so afraid. And I think that like every patriarchal tool, fear is what is holding us back the most. The fact that trans activists are threatening to burn us. I mean, we have tweets and threats on the internet, like so many. I mean, they're talking about radical feminists harassing them. This is just the other way around. We have very, very scary tweets. And I cannot imagine what a young lesbian of 16-year-old just speaking up about something she feels is wrong, reading that would feel. So I think that, of course, showing that lesbians can speak up and that we we feel that we feel we have to talk because this is our lives, our existence are at stake, can maybe empower, inspire so many women to speak up, because I'm sure that the majority of women knows that this is not something, that everything is wrong. So I think that fear is holding us back. But as I said, in France, there is like a specific feminist backlash where this is not about like men and women have to be equal. But it means that, for example, if women have, for example, some rights, or if, for example, some new policy to help women, for example, access jobs or university, it's called sexist as well, because men should have the same thing. So I don't know if, as women in France, will be a political group recognized as oppressed, and what will be the political response right now, because right now in France, we are also in politically, we are struggling with like social rights, social security, and everything. There's a lot of things being destroyed, and women are the first victims of all this. And when women are unemployed and afraid, and it's really more difficult to fight. So right now we do not have maybe the right context, but I really hope that people will also realize that so many girls and women are in danger on the medical side, that so many women also are detransitioning right now. We're not talking about it, but women are speaking up in the UK, maybe some in other countries, even though if trans activists want to erase that and say that it's been used and everything, it's a proof that women can gather and fight. And I really hope that it will be like women just go out of fear, and like politicians will have the courage to stand up. But we cannot, for now, it's not that promising, I have to say, but we hope so.
Well,
all the progress you make in the UK really help us. You know, trans activism is international, and so the resistance to trans activism needs to be international. And whatever happens in the UK will have good consequences on us in the movement here. If there's more detransitional speaking with the curable case or whatever, it will directly help.
Okay, well, we'll keep doing that. I'm not from the UK, but I'm very proud to be part of the movement against this nonsense.
But this is honestly exactly what we were saying earlier, isn't it? I mean, we do have to carry on fighting, because it doesn't help just the UK; it helps every other country as well. And honestly, can I say you two women are like inspirational. Phenomenal, so young and speaking out, and so brave to be doing it. I'm very impressed, and solidarity with you both, and all of you, in fact.
And I agree. I think it's much more dangerous for you guys than it is for us. We now have the support of a lot of other people who are in the fight, but you guys are much more isolated. So please always come to us and use us when you need us, and send us anything you want amplified, and keep yourselves safe, most importantly. And I look forward to the next action, whatever it is. Thank you again, Morgane and Ness, for joining us. I really hope to see more of you guys, except not in the way that we recently have.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Oh my goodness. God almighty. That's our first guest who had to be masked.
That is so frightening, isn't it? That's so frightening. But honestly, how incredibly brave they are. So well spoken, so thoughtful, so sort of politically switched on. It's very, very impressive. But it does, reaffirm my sort of, belief that it's not just for us. It's for women everywhere. Women, in fact, the whole of society now, because we have to counteract the the women thing, the gay thing, but also the lies. We have to sort of push back against this. We have to say, let's try and go back to move the Overton window back to sort of proper political debate.
Yeah, well, I often say that it's not just we're not just going to have to stop all this. We're going to have to undo a lot of damage that's been done. We need to do things like reopening Hampstead women's baths to deprogramming everyone who joined the Stonewall scheme, because all these people believe a load of shite.
There's going to have to be massive recruitment of people into the psychiatry because there's going to need a lot more psychiatrists and psychotherapists to help people sort this mess out.
I know, but unfortunately, a friend was telling me that psychiatry has been a bit bad.
They've just been completely brushing it off. Like the second you hear the word trans, they brush it off. But
not only that, but encouraging people to transition and stuff.
I know.
Really, really bad.
Yeah, but to go back to the France thing, to these women in France, I thought it was really interesting when they were saying the way any laws that specify exemptions for women or special rules to protect women's rights are attacked as a sort of anti-democratic in the French mindset, that their laws have to be written sort of gender neutrally. And that's really interesting because France is, I would think, quite well known for being a culturally very sexist culture. So they can say their laws are completely egalitarian, but the culture is not very egalitarian, I don't think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that was interesting to me. I never realized that. But I know that Napoleon baked in a lot of unbelievable sexism into the Constitution,
Wow.
And I think that that's just kind of lingered, over there to some extent.
Well, they also have like a fierce, they were like a very early Enlightenment adopters, and they were fiercely secularist for a long time. And I think there's a little bit of that mindset going on, a kind of idealism that in an ideal world we don't have to specify specific groups for special protections because we can create our laws that sort of universally apply to everybody. I don't think in the real world that always works out so well as we seem to be seeing in France, when we need to specify that women need special protection sometimes, but people see that as sort of violating the kind of sanctity of
yes, it's interesting, isn't it? That women.
I just don't want anyone to violate the sanctity of me not being on fire.
Right? Exactly.
I mean, we've said so many times, women don't want to live in a world where male violence and sexual entitlement is always there, that we're always wary of it, but we do. So there's no point pretending that we don't. We do, and we don't want it, but we have to. But we know, we just realize it, and so we need to do something about that. We need protections just to allow us to live an equal life in this current society. I mean, it'd be great if they stopped, but until they do, we need this.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. It's not going to happen with like neutral language. It's got to happen with specifically addressing in law sometimes what that these protections need to be there, I think. Yeah.
Oh, listen, I wanted to finish off by saying one thing because since she's listening, Marion Miller, please put your fundraiser back up. Put it back up. People are desperate to help you and they're not able to. So put your fundraiser back up. Ignore the guys who are deliberately trying to spread confusion and division by contacting the CEO of a company that has no rights to do anything to the fundraiser anyway. The fundraiser is essential. Put it back up. Let's get money into it. It's such an important case. Marion, put the fundraiser back up, please. This is my plea to you here. Please put it back up. Right, I think that's enough to talk about today. Unless anyone's got anything else they'd like to cover before we go. Any personal peccadillos you'd like to do? Anyone you want taken out? No, everyone good. Everyone seems like cheery humor. Artie, no, yes. I'm good. Okay, great. Well, that's good hour anyway. Lovely. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you next week or maybe on the weekend. And oh no, I won't see you on the weekend because I'm going to London, so I probably won't see you this weekend for an extra mess. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thanks for all your brilliant comments as always. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everyone. Yeah.